Welcome to the City Club of Eugene's May 7th, 2021 program. So, you want to be an author? This is the 32nd program of our 2020-2021 programming year. My name is Scott Coltrane, and I'm the City Club President. Support for the City Club is provided by our members and sponsors. You can become a member of the City Club at our website, cityclubofeugene.org. Our programs are always available on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page, and our broadcast on public radio station KLCC 89.7 on Mondays at 7 p.m. We have both business and in-kind sponsors, including our diamond sponsors, Kaiser Permanente, University of Oregon, Peace Health, and Lane Community College, as well as receiving generous support from the City of Eugene and from Lane County. In today's program, we ask the question, so, you want to be an author? After finishing a really terrific essay or book, have you wondered how the writer got from having a good idea to getting it published? It's not as easy as it may seem. Where do you get the ideas? Which ideas are worth writing about? How do you find an agent? Who should edit your book or essay? And how do you get it published? Eugene has many fine authors working in different genres. Each has taken a different path to get published, and each has met and overcome many challenges along the way. In this program, they will tell us how they did it. We will hear from J.C. Geiger, Leanne Joshua, Ruby Mcconnell, Andre Royal, and Bob Welch. Biographical information on our speakers is available on our website, cityclubofeugene.org. I would like to thank Joel Corin for coordinating today's program. Our format includes a question and answer period with City Club members and guests via Zoom.
J.C. Geiger, and I am a young adult author. And if I had to sum up my journey to publication in one word, I think it would have to be failure. Just a lot of failure. I failed broadly in lots of different ways. So it's not like it wasn't something of achievement. I failed at writing plays, at publishing screenplays, at short fiction, at long form fiction. I failed to publish internationally and domestically in small journals and large journals. And I actually even failed to have my own high school do a free play that I had written about 7 years into my writing journey. So it was a long road. I basically, at the age of 17, decided that I was going to be seriously become a writer, not knowing that I would have literally 2 decades of mostly failing to publish work. There were a few exceptions, but not many. So in this journey, I was trying all these different forms, all these different ways of getting published and getting out there. And finally, I went to this conference. It was about 12 years into this 2-decade run. And I went to this conference, and I didn't necessarily think I had a better chance of getting my work out there, but the people were so fun. They were like the most fun people that I had yet been around. And this was an SCBWI conference, which is the Society of Children Book Writers and Illustrators. And the editors were really cool, and they seemed approachable, and the people were just a blast to be around. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to fail to publish, I may as well have fun doing it. So I'm going to stick with this crowd. And I decided I'm going to give myself 3 years and really focus so far this kind of disappointing career. But I was going to focus this disappointing career in one particular area. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get into this. I'm actually going to learn a little bit about publication. Before, I was just thinking about writing and perfecting my craft, but nothing really about getting published. So I figured out, in the young adult world, it seemed to me getting an agent made the most sense. It just seemed to be the best career move. So I made this list of 10 agents. And I was like, these 10 agents are the top. They seem like good quality people. They also are selling a good amount of work. So I'm going to aim for them. So I worked for a year and a half, and I produced a novel, a young adult novel, and I sent it to these 10 agents. And consistently for the rest of my career, they all rejected the novel. So that was a year and a half. That's the thing with novels, like short work, you can spend a few weeks or a month and you lose a month. But with a novel, it's like, it's like a year and a half, 2 years for me. So then I summoned my courage and I wrote another novel. And this time I learned all the things I'd kind of gathered, and I wrote this other novel, and I sent it to this same list of 10, the same list of 10 agents. And 3 of them actually wanted to see the full book before they then rejected it also. And so then at this point, I hit my 3-year mark, and I had just gone to this conference again. And I was like, this is the last conference I'm going to. This is never happening. And then my car broke down on the way home. 93 Buick broke down. It was the only car the family had, and stranded me at this like middle of nowhere motel. And I was forced to, to kind of re-examine my life choices. And then I decided, you know what, I'm not selling any books anyway. So I just decided I would go ahead and write a book about someone whose Buick breaks down and strands them at a motel and forces them to re-examine their life choices. And I took about 2 years on this book. And I finally decided to go back to another conference after this was written. And at this conference, I was seated next to an agent, Sarah Crow. And she recognized my name because she had rejected so much of my work. And she said, "Oh, I know you. I've seen you in my inbox." I said, "Yes, you've rejected everything I've ever sent you." And she laughed and said, "Well, what are you working on now?" And she thought this car breakdown story sounded kind of cool. She said, "It sounds authentic," is what she said, actually. So she asked for the full manuscript, which I thought it didn't matter at this point. I'd kind of given up, but I sent her the full manuscript. And 2 weeks later, she signed me as her client. And then it was only 2 months, I think less than 2 months after she signed me, the book ended up going to auction, and I got a 2-book deal with Disney Hyperion. And that was not quite at the 20-year mark, but it happened in like 2 months when all of the rest of this happened. And I can honestly say I had no idea what to do with myself. Like I was so used to failing. I'd gotten quite good at getting rejected. And so it was stunning to have it happen that way. And so I'm still with that agent, and it did change things for me in a good way. But my first young adult book, Wild Man, that came out in 2017. And my second young adult book, The Great Big One, is coming out in July. And so if I had to give 2 pieces of advice to other writers, the first one would be, don't be afraid to write widely and to try a lot of different things. I think I got early advice, which I don't necessarily think was good advice, was to just pick one thing and stick with it. But I found all these experiences in trying to write scripts and screenplays and short fiction and genre fiction actually really helped me. And so whatever you're feeling passionate about, I say write that. And if their passion changes, then change what you're writing, and just follow that kind of that fire inside yourself. And eventually it'll turn out. And the second, of course, is to just keep going. There is this great quote by a poet that is something like, "The purpose of life is to keep failing at larger and larger projects." And I think that's really beautiful advice, is that even if there is no real making it, I feel like it's just a question of, can you keep taking bigger risks and keep pushing yourself? And that would be my advice. So I appreciate everyone who's listening, and I cannot wait to hear these other stories. I get to hear next from Leanne, and I cannot wait to hear her journey.
Thank you, Jeff. I want you to know that I laughed a lot because you were being very funny. And I think it's important that you know that I was laughing here in the quiet. I am Leanne Joshua, and I write everything. I refuse to pick a genre. I don't like to be stuck in a box of any kind. And the people who know me well can tell you that is basically my entire personality. So I basically started writing, but not considering myself a writer, probably in the 5th grade when I started sitting in my closet and writing deep, dark poetry. I continued to write through high school and college, although I never thought that that would be my occupation. I thought I was going to be Secretary of the Interior because for some reason in my mind, it joined being outside and interior decoration. And I figured out that wasn't what it was. So I chose other things. Back in 1994, after a 12-year career of being a health educator for a major university in Texas, where I did a lot of writing, but mostly it was writing on, here's a bookmark to encourage you to get your mammogram, that kind of writing. I moved to Eugene in 1994, and I struck a deal with myself that I had a year to make a career, whatever that is, out of writing comedy. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make myself and other people laugh. It combined things I know that are healthy and help manage stress, because that's what I got from my previous job as a health educator, because laughter is one of the best ways to help your mental and physical health. And also it was something that I was passionate about. And as Jeff said, I really believe that if you can maintain passion about something, you will get through all the rejection, because writing is like being a middle schooler. You will be rejected by lots of people for lots of different reasons. I once told an agent at a writers conference, we were talking about rejection. And I said, I have gotten so many lovely rejection letters that basically say, we think you're talented, we think you're funny, but we just don't have room in our catalog for someone like you. And I told her, what I'm looking for is someone to say, we think your writing is awful and your sense of humor is really lousy, but that's exactly what we need. So come on in. So I have written a lot, but I never really considered it writing, because I had in my mind that you had to write the great American novel to officially be an author. When I moved to Eugene, I started writing jokes for a joke writing service. I want you to imagine back in 1994, before the internet, when there are radio stations and public speakers who need funny content, but they can't get it through the internet. They hired people to produce that for them. And I was one of the people who was paid to do that. So I would wait till like the day before the end of the month, and I would write 100 jokes. You had to write 100 jokes, and I'd send them in the mail with stamps to this joke writing service, and they'd buy like 6 of them. And it was like, that was the first non-rejection I had in my writing life. And I started feeling like maybe I can write for a living. I wrote greeting cards and doormats. If you've ever seen the doormat that says, hi, my name is Matt, that's mine. I wrote an apron once. My other apron burned in the fire. So my writing path was not typical, from deep, dark poetry to jokes that you might see on an apron or a doormat. I do have 26 published books, but they're all very small. I've written 1 novel. I thought I failed at it, but then when I read it 10 years after I wrote it, I kind of liked it. So one of the things I have learned, and one of the pieces of advice that I would give, is try not to be your own worst critic. There are people out there, even if they're not agents or publishers, who are going to get something out of what you're writing. Maybe it's just you and your family, but I have edited memoirs for several people who are writing just for themselves and their family, and the joy it has brought them in producing that writing is enough. So don't be your own worst critic. There are people out there who will enjoy you. My second piece of advice is that writing makes you a writer. it took me a long time to acknowledge that. It's not publication that makes you a writer. It's not that that's what you do and that's only what you do that makes you a writer. I'm also a stand-up comic and an improv comic and a wiener dog wrangler and still a health educator. And I used to be a public speaker before COVID. So acknowledge that if you are writing on a regular basis, you are a writer. Once you accept that, I think it opens you up to the universe providing more opportunities for you so that you're not standing in your own way. So that's my bit of my story, and I am really excited to bring on next somebody I met at an author's event, and we just had the best time talking, so I can't wait to hear her stories. It's Ruby Mcconnell.
Thanks, Leanne. I too was laughing while you were talking, and it is important that we know that in this sort of distanced age. Hi, everyone. I am Ruby Mcconnell. I am a nonfiction writer and came to writing through no particular path related to writing whatsoever. I started as an academic. I was a researching and working environmental geologist and volcanologist for many, many years, for over a decade. And when the Great Recession hit, had an opportunity, like a lot of people, to make some big changes to my life, and took some time off of geology to move down to Eugene, and was a performing artist. I had been a trained professional dancer and sort of ran away and joined the circus and took it as an opportunity to work on my first book, which for me, A Woman's Guide to the Wild, which for me was really a response to the kind of work that I had been doing, and the kind of life that I had been living. I really had something to say, and I lucked out. I had a lot of experience writing at a professional level. I had a lot of experience writing as an academic. I think the first books I wrote were about pumice. They were master's theses and undergraduate theses. I have a 500-page master's thesis on pumice, which is probably the most boring thing that anyone has ever written, but it was a good exercise in patience. And when I did start writing, and I went into it with no expectation, and really no idea what I was doing, which for me was really kind of insulating and empowering, because I didn't have a success or failure mindset. I was just kind of bumbling around. So I started working on the book, discovered that that's not what you do when you write nonfiction. So then started working on a book proposal, which is what you do when you write nonfiction, and am one of the few people that you will meet in publishing who managed to get pulled out of a slush pile from a wonderful independent press, Sasquatch Books. And that was my foot in the door to publishing. And I have continued to be that lucky. When I switched to more literary writing and transitioned to creative nonfiction, which is really what I write now, I was also lucky that the first couple of things that I wrote got picked up by really supportive magazines and outlets that gave me the encouragement that I needed to continue to write full-length works. So one of the other things that I did early on, actually, that helped to get pulled out of the slush pile that was non-traditional, was I actually had a Kickstarter that was successful for my book, because at that time it was a financial transition, and I was able to prove with the Kickstarter that there was interest and motivation behind my ideas, and I think that that was really useful. So the most recent book that I published, Ground Truth, A Geological Survey of a Life, is also with a small press. I have it's a different small press, Overcup Books, out of Portland. And I've had just a really great publishing pathway with independent small presses that have a lot of motivation to push my work. And that's really been the bread and butter of what's allowed me to go forward and become an agented writer for my projects that I have coming down the line. If I had advice to give my first piece of advice would be to ignore advice because my pathway has been so different from the experiences of almost every other writer. And I've really succeeded by kind of breaking a lot of rules. I encourage people to do the same and see if that works for them. I also believe that readers make great writers. So my best training for being a writer was being a voracious reader. And I think that that probably holds true for everyone. But more than anything, I think it's important just to live life, and to live life with passionate intensity, and to live life with voracious curiosity, because you have to give yourself fodder and you have to feed your voice. And that comes from the rich tapestry of our experiences. So be a person that doesn't want to be a writer, but that needs to be a writer because you've found a story within yourself that is pressing to be shared with the world, is the best piece of advice that I can give you. But I am also excited to hear what Chef Andre Royal has to share with us about his writing story.
All right, well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. My story is actually one of irony. It started out with a considerable mountain that I had to climb, more or less. And that was, I had some personal health issues, and I didn't know how I was going to actually earn an income. I got a really bad diagnosis, and it was achalasia, and so I had trouble eating and drinking properly. I had trouble swallowing food, and then over the course of time, I changed careers. I was dealing with these health issues, and I moved to Oregon, and then I got diagnosed with narcolepsy, and so then I couldn't eat, sleep, or drink, and so being formerly a chef, getting into a new career, being newly diagnosed, and moving to a new area and knowing effectively no one and going through these health issues, I needed a way to process that. And so I started writing kind of like as a coping mechanism. And throughout the process, I got really close to getting published. I went back to school. I went through like this whole personal thing where, I don't know, maybe it was a midlife crisis, maybe it wasn't, I don't know, but why waste a perfectly good midlife crisis? And I just tried to make the best use of it. And so what I did was I just started doing bucket list stuff, and I always wanted to work on a project with my son. It was very fortunate that during this health issue, when I was losing my ability to draw, he was actually gaining his ability, and he eclipsed me. And so he was still in high school at the time, and he became my illustrator. So we had this opportunity to actually do a father and son, partnership, where one, I was writing and kind of designing. I couldn't draw like I used to, but we had sat at the table so many times to where I was teaching him things, and we just had a connection where I don't think it would have been possible for me to even get published and get the children's books illustrated in the fashion that they were if we didn't have that connection. The other ironic part was, the first book that we wrote, I mean, a lot of it was based off of personal struggle. And so I was a chef who had trouble eating, so I couldn't eat or drink. And so the first book was The Critic. And so it was about a chef who became a food critic. He just happened to be a hippo. And then the second book that we released was about a bear who fell asleep during a game of hide and seek. And so that was had more or less to do with the sleeping disorder I got diagnosed with. But I created the books to, one, raise awareness, and to also create some residual income, because I had health issues that impacted my ability to actually earn money. So that was, for me, a way to kind of problem solve and process what I was going through. But the stories themselves, if you didn't know the backstory behind what promoted me or what prompted me to write them, they were just good stories, like old-fashioned Shel Silverstein, Dr. Seuss-esque, before, the whole, not so popular, getting canceled kind of thing happened. Um, it was just, I wanted to create like new classics, something that would be fairly accessible and kind of timeless. And so for me, even though it was out of necessity and the irony that I got published in the worst time, like I went to a thing, I met J.C. Geiger, and I felt actually really motivated hearing his story. And I ended up getting published soon after, just happenstance. I met someone who was like a friend of a friend, and we're like all partying at some place, and it was like, hey, I know a publisher, I know you're trying to get published, and it worked out. Soon after that, though, the pandemic started, and so it was like no one wanted to touch anything, not even money. And so like my first sale, when I finally got my books, like I'm in the office, it's empty. I meet someone, and like it's a Lysol $5 bill. And so the timing of it, restaurants were closing, and my first book's about a chef in a restaurant, and I'm like, is this even going to be a thing? Like, just what I would leave someone who's struggling with is plan on struggling some more. Like, how much do you want to do it? It might not be an easy pathway, but do it because, why not? Life is short. You probably have more time than you think, but less time than you thought, and just go for it. I personally, I didn't have an easy road, but it was a journey that I wouldn't trade for anything, because, you know, it allowed me to, create a legacy and start something, not just for my family, but for future generations. And I'm just thinking in the long run, like, I got to do something cool that I always imagined doing, but I didn't think was really all that possible. I struggled with reading, and here I am writing books that you can color in and you can read, and if you can't read, then you can interact with them in a different way. And so it wasn't just based on reading level. So yeah, I'd just say just do what you can do. And if you don't think you can do it anyways, and do it to the best of your ability. And that's about the best advice I could give, is prepare for some irony, but go for it. The next speaker that I'm excited to introduce is someone I had a chance to help fundraise for the library with, and that would be Bob Welch. He's written over 20 books, and he's kind of like a local legend. And so to be on the same billing with him, in this, I'm grateful. So I'm going to be turning it over here to Bob, if my timing is right.
So I'm that weird guy who in 5th grade, when it was career day, you could go out and hang out with somebody at the library or at the school if you wanted to be a teacher. And I was growing up in Corvallis, and I asked if I could go interview the Oregon State basketball coach because I wanted to be a sports writer. So I'm one of those people that wanted to write from the get-go, be a newspaper reporter. That's exactly what I did. Started at the Register Guard in '89, 40 years in newspapers. And in the early 90s, I got a chance to get into the book writing world. My first book sold so poorly that the publisher said they had 5,000 copies in the warehouse, and they'd sell them to me for 50 cents each. And I said, well, what happens if I don't buy those? Well, I mean, what physically happens to those books? Because I worked really hard on that. And they said, well, we have them recycled. And I said, like, into what? And paper towels and Kleenexes and toilet paper. I said, my book could get turned into toilet paper? And he said, yeah. I said, when I wrote that book, I remember thinking I wanted to touch people's lives in a special place. That was not the place that I had in mind. But at any rate, so I wrote in the 90s, I wrote a bunch of inspirational stuff that didn't sell very well. And then I kind of reinvented myself and just kind of went more with whatever the muse was for me at the time. So I'm pretty eclectic. I've written biographies. I've written Hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. I've written inspiration. I've written children's books. I've written about Dick Fosbury, the guy that enjoyed or invented the Fosbury flop high jump style. And my latest book is called Saving My Enemy, about an American soldier and a German soldier from World War II who became friends late in their lives and wound up forgiving each other for what they had done to one another in one another's countries, and sort of alleviated each other of all this guilt and shame that both felt. So anyway, that's kind of my writing life. I've done a couple of dozen books. I've done about half of those have been publishers, Simon and Schuster, St. Martin's, and some smaller presses, and about half of them I've self-published. I like self-publishing because you can pretty much make every single decision yourself. Publishers, and I think there's less difference in getting published anymore and self-publishing. The differences are really not as great as they once were. Nobody's going to send you on a 25 city book tour if you get published, unless you're John Grisham or somebody like that. So I think people should consider the self-publishing route as well. My advice, people always say, write what you know. And again, my framework is nonfiction, I should tell you. Write what you know, but I would rather say, write what you care about. Write what you want to know about. The joy for me as a writer has been being forced into uncomfortable situations where I don't know somebody. I don't know a particular genre, and learning about it, becoming a detective, becoming a reporter, and finding out. I wrote a book in '04 called American Nightingale about the first nurse to die after the landings at Normandy in World War II. I didn't know anything about nurses. I knew very little about the Jewish culture, and I knew very little about war. But I had to become kind of not an expert, but I had to learn as much as I possibly could about those three subjects. And it was fascinating. It took me to France. It took me to Boston. I was the only non-Jewish person at a barbecue in Boston. It was awesome experience. So yeah, go where your curiosity takes you, not so much what you know about. I didn't know a whole lot, about Germany and World War II, and the sons of Fritz Engelbert, who I wrote about in this latest book. We traded 757 emails in less than a year. And I got to know these guys, and I got to know their culture, and I got to know their history. So that's one thing that I love about writing, is it pulls you into places you wouldn't normally go, and you get to meet people you wouldn't normally meet. So number one, write what you care about, go where your curiosity takes you. Number two is accept that writing takes some discipline. I think there's this image of, in the evening, turning on your lamp, pouring yourself a glass of Merlot, lighting a candle, and then the words just flow out of your fingers. Well, not so much. I think you need to set goals. I think you need to have deadlines, and I think you need to have some accountability. Now, that said, writing is not science. Like you heard from some of these other people, they have totally different methods, and those work for them, and that's awesome. And I have taught the Beachside Writers Workshop for years, and I tell my folks, if it works for you, do it. But this is what works for me is sort of, saying I'm going to get this done by this time, and holding myself to it, and then being willing to let other people read your work. And wow, that's painful at the end of it. You're tired. You've been working for a year or two on a book. The last thing you need is criticism, but it's actually the thing that you really need is criticism, because it helps make you better. So we'll go to questions.
I'm Joel Corin from the program committee, and I'm coordinating today's program. Today we have a first questioner. Jason Brown is an associate professor at the University of Oregon in the creative writing department. He's got a bachelor's from Bowdoin, master's from Cornell, and has published books with the interesting titles, Why the Devil Chose New England for His Work, and A Faithful but Melancholy Account of Several Barbarities Lately Committed. Jason will ask the first question to our panel.
Hello, everyone, and well, thanks for having me. It's been a delight, first of all, to meet all these writers. I'm from Maine originally, but I've lived in Eugene for a long time now, 10 years, and boy, it's great to hear the different pathways that you all have taken to being writers. It reminds me that when I have students at the U of O, I tell them, you know, here I am, a short story writer, which is like committing career suicide, by the way, but there are so many different kinds of writers out there, so many pathways, and that's what we've seen today. So I have two questions. I think someone rightly warned me that my first question might have already been answered, but I'm going to float these two questions out there, and they're related, and you can grasp on to whichever one inspires you. So my first question, and these come from my own experience, really. My first question is, what were your biggest challenges when you first started writing in the early days? And boy, Jeff really captured the fail better story, Samuel Beckett's sort of advice to keep failing better as you go. And so, but for some, one of the biggest challenges is just finding time, finding the time to develop as a writer, but others it's rejection, lack of confidence. But what are those early challenges that people have to overcome? So the second, some of you have already spoken to that in great ways, but the second question is, it's a related question, I think. Can you identify an early inspiration that sort of launched you into writing? There are so many, as I say to my students, there are so many sensible things to do with your life, right? There's so many, I mean, that have obvious pathways. You could go to nursing school, you could go to law school and become a lawyer or a nurse, and it's like, it's laid out for you. So there has to be something that separated you out from the sensible pathway. As my father said to me when I was 21, what do you think you're doing with your life? He thought I was insane. Maybe he still does, but at least I have a job, he says. And, so what are the maybe moments of inspiration that sort of set you on this pathway? And even maybe, a sort of addendum to that question would be, there have to be moments that keep you going, right? What are those moments of inspiration that renew your faith in this passion? You know what I mean? And maybe sort of talk about some of those. I'm talking about like the inspiration that gets you going, and then there's the inspiration that keeps you going over the years, right? It's a lot of work. And one thing I know that all writers have struggled with, and I've struggled with it myself, is, especially when you sense, is there anyone listening? Does anyone care that I'm up at 5 a.m. or in my case, up at 2:30 a.m. working on this thing? It's a lot of work, as Bob pointed out, discipline and work. And so you need that inspiration to keep the faith. So I hope those questions, bring out some answers.
Anyone want to take a shot at that? Andre?
Thank you. I'd say those are great questions. First, the question that really sticks out to me is what motivated me and what kept me going. Well, what motivated me, it was more of almost like a compulsion. I used to be a really good artist, and I always had this creative side. And so the idea of not facilitating that and having something unfinished that I was passionate about, it just really kind of ate away at me. And I don't know what I would have done with all of that still inside of me. Like, everyone's like, oh, you should do this or you should do that. But what do you feel compelled to do? Like, it almost doesn't feel like a choice, at some point. It's something that revisits you. And, for those who, like, maybe it is kind of more of a choice and it's something that they're doing kind of leisurely out of just like a hobby, and they don't have that deep desire, I'm almost envious, because, like, just even keeping the scraps of paper, mustering up the confidence and sharing. Like, I suffered from like almost crippling social anxiety, and you would never know it. because of how much you have to really put yourself out there, to the degree where people almost don't respect it. Like, you become your own hype person. And, you know, it's back to the advice. I don't necessarily advise that, but if you have to do that, then guess what? That's what you have to do, and that's your pathway. But if you can find someone to say some kind words and promote what you're doing, then that's great too. It's always great to have support, even if it's an agent or just a friend or whoever, somebody backing you on a personal level.
Leanne?
I think what inspired me originally was that I needed a way to facilitate processing of childhood trauma. And I know that that's kind of at the soul of most comedians, and I think it's at the soul of a lot of writers as well. And I think that's why I was attracted very early on to reading. When I was in the 6th grade, I read like the Brothers Karamazov. I was a very avid and weird reader. My role models were Sylvia Plath and Edgar Allan Poe. I always tell people that I wasn't voted class clown in high school. Had there been such a category, I would have been voted most likely to depress people, because I had a lot. You know, my dad was married 4 times. My mom was married 5 times. We had new children who were now related to me all the time. There was gunfire inside the house. There was just a lot. And I needed a way to escape, and reading was that escape. And so when I got to the point where it's like, how can I do something for myself to escape? It was amazing that I could create my own alternative realities, whether, you know, slight alterations of real life, which is what a lot of comedy is. It's very much based upon real life and processed, or complete fictional approaches to storytelling. And so I think the answer is, my inspiration is the failure of therapy to work for me. That's my answer.
Ruby? You're muted, Ruby.
Hi. Yeah, I think, I think the irony for me is that the biggest challenge might also be, you know, the thing I rely on most. For me, it's the recognition that as a woman outdoor science writer, as an eco-feminist writer, the biggest challenge that I have is the way that publishing is male dominated, and the way that I'm treated by men in this field, and the way that I'm given or not given entree. And that is with full recognition that as a white woman, I stand with an enormous amount of privilege in this industry. But this is a gate-kept industry. And I write books with the word woman in the title. And I get a lot of great support from women writers, and I get a lot of great support from, you know, I've had wonderful female professors and mentors, and I get a lot of men that say like, oh, your book is cute. And I get a really different response. And so trying to break into especially environmental and especially nonfiction and heavy hitting science writing, and the way that I am treated in the industry as a woman in those fields has been the biggest challenge for me. And I think that that's probably true of many people who identify in a lot of different ways. But I think that there are signs that that is changing. And I know, and I want to encourage people to know that there are really wonderful support groups out there, of communities forming that are uplifting voices that have been marginalized historically in this industry. And that's an exciting piece of this. And so then maybe that's what's most exciting, is that you're starting to see more and more of that as people are elevating each other's voices, and maybe entree will be easier and treatment will be better and pay will be commensurate.
Anyone else care to answer that before we move on to the next question? Jeff, Bob?
I would just say the thing that I learned was 2 things. You have to have tons of confidence that you have something to say to the world, and then you have to have tons of humility to let people come alongside you and help you say it better. And then I think it just comes down, a lot of it just comes down to having the courage to understand that you have a voice and you have something to say, and then go say it. As a columnist 3 times a week, you know, you can tell in a hurry whether people like something or don't like something. And, you know, you do what you can do, you throw it out there, you hope in some small way you can change the world, and then you move on.
I think something for me that has just resonates and speaks to both pieces of what is challenging and what is inspiring is Ira Glass, who does This American Life, said something that really has fascinated me and stuck with me, which is the most challenging part, or one of the most challenging parts of being any kind of an artist, is that you typically have a profound appreciation for good work or great work. And when you see that and you feel it, and it makes your mind and your body react in the way that it does, you know, you want to be able to do that. And so you've got this thing called taste, this problem of good taste, right? Where you love these great, amazing things. And then simultaneously, you're trying to produce work that does that. And there's this long period of dissonance between being inspired by amazing things and being able to create something that's as good as what you love. And I think that we would all be so lucky to get close to those things that have really woken us up inside and inspired us. But I think a piece of advice I would give anyone in any art form would be comfortable with that dissonance, trust your taste, surround yourself with things that you find inspired by and that you find beautiful, and don't be graceful with yourself as you spend the very long process in trying to get there yourself.
We have a question submitted on the other side, the marketing side. Marketing/sales create a barrier seemingly more difficult than the writing. Please offer best practices. Anyone like to handle that one? Does anyone have best practices for dealing with publishing and sales? Jeff?
And the panel went silent.
I'll take a stab at it.
Go for it. Take it. By the way, can I just say, Leanne, I want to read your memoir. So I hope that.
I'm waiting for a couple people to die, but.
Hey, that happens. That's a condition of memoir writing.
Exactly.
Just so that doesn't become part of the story.
Yeah, no, that won't be part of the story. So I have my first book that actually made any money, and it's still the only book that truly made any money. And that's, you know, something that is hard to impress upon people. People think they're going to make money writing and it's going to all come rolling in. With Bedtime Stories for Dogs, which was written in 1997, and it's traditional fairy tales rewritten to read to your dogs way before people thought that that was normal. I was trying to normalize Crazy Dog and Cat Lady because there is a companion Cat Lady book. And it's with a big publishing house, Andrews and McNeil Universal. And this is back in the day and age when they actually did press for you. I didn't go on a nationwide tour for this little book, but they did send me across a couple of states, and they did a lot of marketing for me. And I have worked with small and medium publishers and self-publishing. And something that Bob said about let's give it up for self-publishing, it is so much easier these days, I think, to do your own marketing, which you're going to have to do anyway.
Amen.
Whether you're with a big publisher or you've done it yourself, is to find that intersection of who your book, who the audience for your book is, and who's got the money to purchase the book. So for a long time as a public speaker, I wrote books about the things that I was speaking on. So Don't Get Mad, Get Funny, and How'd All These Ping Pong Balls Get in My Bag, and 101 Comedy Games for Children and Adults, because that's what I would talk about at conferences. And at the back of the room at the conference, 500 people just heard me talk. I could sell between 20 and 200 books. I've never sold that many books in any other kind of venue. And so I think that one of the things, if marketing is the primary obstacle that people are facing is to publish books that really align with audiences that you find yourself in front of, or to make yourself get out there and be in front of audiences for the book that you have just published.
Jeff, do you want to talk about your experiences marketing Wildman?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with what it was. The marketing for Wildman was the aforementioned 93 Buick Century that broke down and stranded me and inspired the book was still running at the time of publication. And kind of what Bob and Leanne have hinted at about having to do your own publicity. I was talking with my team, and what I ended up doing was actually, they said, well, if you want to do anything crazy, kind of, you're on your own. And I wanted to do something crazy. So I decided to drive this 93 Buick from Eugene to New York City to see if it would make it, because it breaks down a lot. But the key was I would drive a certain number of miles for every pre-sale book. So every book that someone bought, I would drive a certain number of miles. And then also if someone donated $10 to the American Library Association, I would drive a certain number of miles. So there was like a philanthropic hook, which I really enjoyed. So it didn't just have to be about me. And that also helped me with that whole, self-promotion thing, which I find kind of awkward. But this was an adventure and I might totally fail spectacularly. So it was really fun. I had a little meter that would show how much had been pledged. And then I live streamed the whole thing from the Buick. And the publishing team was like, you probably won't make it out of your driveway. Like, it's a first book, like no one, or, you might make it out of Eugene, but it actually worked. And a lot of it, like, Ruby actually was huge help, and some other friends were really supportive and blogged about it and watched it. And it was really kind of a carnival, and it was really fun, but it was totally had to come from me. It was a self-directed with the support of my friends and family, but it was not something that they said, hey, do this and we're going to pay for it. It was, what's the most exciting thing I could do to get this book out there?
I think you really have to become your own advocate, because nobody else is probably going to do a whole lot for you. And when I was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, my brother-in-law would say, Bob, you can, whenever we run into hikers, no matter what you start out talking about, like where's water, where are you guys camping tonight, you can always wind up mentioning your book at the end of the conversation. I think you kind of have to do that.
Can I just butt in for a second? One of the things that people don't realize, I think, and I've learned this from doing Willamette Writers Conference several years, is that nowadays a lot of agents and a lot of publishers aren't as interested in your book as they are in your social media platform.
Yep.
And so if you really are thinking ahead in terms of, I have this thing inside me and I really want to do it, but I also would like it to sell, you need to, simultaneous to writing your book, be growing your social media platform in a way that supports the book. I mean, a lot of us have Twitter accounts that have nothing to do with what we're writing about. So you need to be thinking about, how do I use social media now? Because we don't all have a 93. Is that what the Buick was? 93 Buick to
Yes.
drive across country in? Hey, I had a 62.
If you want to borrow
Nova.
it, you're welcome to. It's still in my driveway. So
Anyone else care to answer that question? We have time for one quick question. Patricia Frischkoff has a quick question. Maybe not.
You answered that one. You asked that one.
No, okay. Mary, do you have a question?
Yes.
Quickly.
It just popped into my mind. Ruby's probably answered this 100 times. Ruby, what is the essential message of A Woman's Guide to the Wild? I ask as a South Side Chicago girl. What do I need to know?
There's a serious answer and there's a not serious answer. The not serious answer is just that, sometimes you're going to pee on your shoes and it shouldn't stop you from going outside. The serious answer is that everyone needs to have a relationship to the natural world for the health of everyone on the planet. And in order to have a healthy relationship with the natural world, you have to go outside into it. And that everyone's outdoor experience is unique and valid. And you shouldn't allow expectations or traditions or gaps in skill set stop you from fostering a healthy relationship with the environment, even if it is standing in your front yard and looking up at the sky for a minute every day.
Anyone else care to comment in the last minute that we have? If not, I just want to thank you all. This has been the most enjoyable hour learning about the writing and the publishing and the sales of books. You were all very creative, and it should be noted that there were a number of other authors here in Eugene that could have been asked to participate in this process. This area tends to be a magnet for creative folks. So thank you very much. And now I'll turn it over to our president.
Thank you.
Paul Train.
This has been our May 7th, 2021 program. So, you want to be an author? Before we proceed, I'd like to recognize our diamond sponsors. Kaiser Permanente exists to provide high-quality, affordable healthcare services and to improve the health of our members and the communities we serve. More information at www.kp.org. Support comes from the University of Oregon. Since 1876, UO has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically. More information at uoregon.edu. Peace Health is proud to serve Eugene, Lane County, and beyond. As your hometown healthcare partner for more than 80 years, our mission is to keep you and your family healthy. Learn more at peacehealth.org. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. I would also like to acknowledge our gold sponsors: Hirschner Hunter, Attorneys, LLP, Dr. Sandy Ibarra, Hearing Associates, and Pacific Cascade Federal Credit Union. Before we thank our speakers today, I have a few more quick announcements. Thank you to our in-kind sponsors: KRVM 91.9 Radio, Pack Info and Simplified Computing, LLC, Dotson's Photography, and a special thank you to public radio station KLCC FM 89.7 for airing City Club programs on Mondays at 7 p.m. Our programs are always available on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. If you are a City Club of Eugene member, you can ask a question at a future taping of our programs. If you are not yet a member, you can join and then participate. More information is on our website, cityclubofeugene.org. On our program next week, the City Club will look at the work done by undergraduate scholars in a program titled Our Future is in Good Hands, Scholars of the University of Oregon Class of 2021. We will hear from Anastasia Browning, Jaire Johnson, Jude Stone, and Min Nguyen. More details and information about future programs can be found online at the City Club's website, cityclubofeugene.org. Now, I would like to thank today's speakers for a great program: J.C. Geiger, Leanne Joshua, Ruby Mcconnell, Andre Royal, and Bob Welch. This concludes today's program. Be well and stay safe.